Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Santhosh, and I am a final year medical student at Imperial College London. And today I will give you a presentation on how to hopefully write a great systematic review and meta-analysis even without supervision. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a bit about myself, just so you know that I have some credibility and can trust in what I'm going to say in the next 50 minutes or so. So in 2016, I started as a medical student at Imperial. And after second year, I had some lab experience. It was mainly in neuro-oncology and in neurosciences. And then in 2018, after third year, I learned bioinformatics and then worked for a summer in neuro-oncology again in Germany. And in 2020, and this is the important year, me and a couple of friends decided to write a systematic literature review and meta-analysis in neurosurgery. However, unfortunately, we couldn't really find any guidance or anybody to supervise us. So we did it without supervision, and we did get accepted into a top neurosurgical journal and presented in the US and in Europe. And we have repeated the same technique we applied then many times. And hopefully I can kind of explain how we did it today, and hope that you can then go on and to do it and do it yourselves as well. So since then, because of this sort of project, it's opened a lot of doors for me. I was then working in 2021 to 2022 as honorary research fellow at Imperial, and was given the opportunity to register and pilot my own cohort study. And in 2020, I joined both Harvard Medical School and University of Cambridge in neuro-oncology and neurosurgery labs, focusing on bioinformatics and machine learning techniques. And these were all things I had learned previously because I did a meta-analysis. And from April, I'll be in Oxford. Again, it has to do a lot of, it has to do with the statistics. So what I'm trying to say is, if you play it smart and you do a good systematic review and meta-analysis, you can leverage it and take it to different places. But without further ado, I shall tell you now how my group and I did it back then without any supervision. So how did we even get to our research project back then? So our research project was on normal pressure hydrocephalus. It was specifically on how you predict shunt response in patients with normal pressure hydrocephalus. And basically we were three friends. We were all in the same hospital on our neurosurgical placements. And we saw that all patients basically received shunts, BP shunts, no matter their preclinical diagnostics, no matter their patient characteristics, and so on and so forth. So it was a bit of like a hit and miss. So everybody was shunted, and you see whether they respond to the shunting. If they do, that's good. If they don't, bad luck. And we thought, okay, this can't be true, right? Because shunting has many complications. So we spoke to the neurosurgeons, and they told us, yeah, this is just how it is. Check the guidelines. So we did check the guidelines, and then after checking the guidelines, there was no clear guidance there as well. So we had a bit more thorough look at the literature, and there was no real meta-analysis on this subject. There was a systematic literature review done by Harvard professors about 15 years ago, but they didn't have a meta-analysis, and their conclusions were thus not really very strong. So our idea was then finally to do it ourselves, because 15 years is a very long time in medical research. So we thought we could rerun it and see if we can do a meta-analysis. We proposed it to quite a couple of neurosurgeons in our hospital, but unfortunately nobody was willing to supervise us for it, because everybody said it was quite unrealistic to do it because of the sheer volume of data and because of the heterogeneity as well. So there were multiple problems. We couldn't find a supervisor. There was an extreme volume of papers. At that point, I didn't really have a team per se, so I had my friends, but They weren't sure if they wanted to do this or not, because everybody was unsure of how much time it would take. I hadn't really had any previous experience with doing anything such as a systematic literature review or meta-analysis. And in this setting, I didn't really have much statistical knowledge as well. It was mainly bioinformatics, which was more about genes rather than patient numbers and so on and so forth. So I can imagine a lot of you, if you went out for systematic literature review, would face a lot of similar problems. So anyway, we decided not to give up and try it again. So we formed a team and got another member to help us because it was in total around 7,000 papers per person. So we thought, okay, how do we do this smartly? How do we do this in the most time efficient way? Because fifth year is quite a difficult year. We have a lot of exams. So we thought, okay, we need a plan. And basically, our thinking was, if the professors from Harvard can do it too, that we could do it as well, just based on the assumption that we could acquire the knowledge they had before they did the meta-analysis or systematic review online. And nowadays, everything is online. All the knowledge that perhaps was privileged to professors back in 2000 or before that, nowadays it's all freely available. And I'm German, so in Germany we have the saying, everybody cooks soup with water. So with this saying, my idea was that we just had to read up on a lot of these papers and basically distill their structures, their thinking patterns, which is quite evident if you read many systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and to distill them into like a recipe, which is their recipe, and then kind of enhance this to make it even better. So we're basically standing on the shoulders of these giants, yeah, but we're still trying to make it better. And after we've done that, so we had a read of a lot of top systematic reviews and meta-analyses from top journals. Once we've had done that, we read articles on how to write systematic literature reviews and how to code a meta-analysis. And once we've done that, we created a blueprint of to-dos for myself, my team, for the next approximately 3 to 6 months. Well, we thought it would only take 3 months, but it ended up taking 6 months or even longer, to be honest. So from start to finish, basically, I formed my team, 4 persons in total. I thought that was a good number to start with. And then we started conducting it, and we had around 1 team brief every couple of weeks. And after a couple of months, we were done with reading through all the papers and had collated all the papers into tables and appraised them. And on the basis of the table, we then wrote the results section, and using the results and the table, we collated the data, wrote a meta-analysis, and at the end, we then wrote the introduction, did the methods, and finally the discussion. And once we had done that, we had a sort of working manuscript. And with that working manuscript, we thought, okay, either we now submit it directly to a journal, or we try to get a second opinion before doing that. And I think that was a wise thing to do, given that we had no experience with this whatsoever. So we sent the manuscript to neurosurgeons to hear just what they thought about it. And the first neurosurgeon, and this is like quite a prominent guy at our hospital here at Imperial, and he really slandered the paper. He said, this is terrible, it's way too long. You can present this maybe at a student conference, but this is unpublishable, basically. So that was a bit of a bummer, but people are unpredictable. So we thought, okay, let's send it to somebody else as well. So we sent it to perhaps the greatest neurosurgeon in Germany, who I knew through a previous elective, And he thought the paper was quite good, and he loved the idea. And I asked him then, okay, would you like to be a senior author on it? So this is another advantage of, doing the manuscript first yourself and then sending it to people, because then you don't sacrifice first authorship, because you're not asking them for any supervision. You're asking them to have a look at the paper and then maybe, fine tune it. So you can decide where they will go on the paper. So he was happy to help us a bit with it. And nonetheless, we sent it to another neurosurgeon. Came across him by chance, really. And he was extremely helpful in fine-tuning the article or the manuscript to a level where it was really, really good. So despite me saying, yeah, do it without supervision, I also want to stress the point, send it once you've done it to as many people as you can, because 50% of the people aren't going to be very helpful at all. 40% will, say maybe it's good, it's great, yeah, sure, have me as senior author, but only like a few people will give you valuable insights and make it come to the next level. But those people will really make all the difference. So finally, after probably around 4 rounds of editing from that neurosurgeon's input, and we completely rewrote the discussion, and we then sent it perhaps over ambitiously to the European Journal of Neurosurgery, but over ambition is rewarded if you put the work into it, and the manuscript was accepted with minor revisions. So I think the main takeaway I want you to sort of take to heart in this lecture is that you have to lose the idea that writing a systematic review and meta-analysis is complex or difficult to do. Especially the systematic review it's quite easy. It's time consumptive, but intellectually not that demanding once you know how to do it. And it does require stamina though. But just that shift in mindset is extremely pivotal for you starting it and then finishing it as well. The meta-analysis is more difficult. If you want to do it properly anyway, you should learn how to code R and learn a bit of statistics. But if you're an autodidact and have access to the internet, it's quite doable as well. And I will give you some resources later on, which I use and are very good to learn it quickly. And now the most challenging part of this whole thing is how to find a truly meaningful research question that, if answered, will push the specialty, whatever it is that you choose, forward. And finding a research question, I mean, we found it by being on the wards and thinking about the patient and treatment pathway and questioning it. And I know we're all just medical students, but I don't think we should tell ourselves we're just medical students. How could we, question the status quo? But that is the best way to find a valuable research question, by thinking about what the patient goes through, from disease to treatment, to aftercare, to diagnosis as well, and thinking about, okay, how can we make that patient experience better? And how can we improve patient outcomes? And by reading a lot of papers on, say, disease XYZ, you can, and reading the guidelines as well, you can try to find gaps in the current knowledge, because oftentimes guidelines, if there is a gap and they don't know themselves really what they're talking about, they will see there is no conclusive evidence on XYZ. So those are often the golden nuggets where you have to dig further and see, okay, wow, maybe there is no conclusive evidence on it because nobody's done or attempted a meta-analysis. And secondly, getting some opinions from specialists in that field regarding unquestioned, like what are the biggest unanswered questions in the field. Ask them that and they'll come up probably with 10. And then one of them probably you can pursue a systematic review on. So our blueprint was the following. And the blueprint, like I want you to take away from this session as well, is the following. So number one, form like a balanced team of an intellectually able team. And I don't want to, make this about IQ or whatever, but make a team of like hardworking people. I would actually reword that. Second, expose yourself to whatever field you choose and read all the literature and be on the watch on your placements, and then read even more literature, read a lot of reviews, and read up on their limitations, read their discussions, because oftentimes they will say, oh yeah, more research is needed on X, Y, Z. And that is sort of a gold nugget for you to go and attempt to sort of fill that gap, especially if it's like 15 or 20 years ago. And doing that will help you find your research question. And once you have that, do a bit of market research. Ask doctor surgeons what they think about this research question and whether it's actually meaningful to be answered. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people write a lot of systematic reviews and meta-analyses, but there are a lot of bad systematic reviews and meta-analyses out there, and a lot of systematic reviews which are published in very low impact journals. And if it's just important for you to get a publication out, fair enough. But if you want to create something meaningful, which will also help yourself in your career to, leverage and then, climb the academic ladder, then you want to make sure that it's a valuable research question. Once you have certainty that this research question is worth pursuing, perform the systematic review, make your tables, collect the data from the included studies, and try running the meta-analysis and make your graphs. So, useful resources I want to recommend you today to read before you actually start doing the meta-analysis. I want to give you these because I wish I had known about these before I attempted it, because it would have saved me a lot of time. So on the Cochrane training website, there is a really good guide on how to do a review from sort of start to finish. It takes around half an hour maybe to read, maybe less, and it will save you a lot of time and save you from making certain mistakes. Furthermore, regarding team building, a systematic review or any project really can be really impeded if you don't have a well-functioning team, because that's sort of the machine that will help you sort of create this piece of scientific work. So I can recommend from my own experience that a team of 4 usually works really well, especially if you're leading the team. You don't want to micromanage too much. So a team of 4 is really good. You want to form a balanced team. So by that, I mean, you want to have all sorts of personalities, not only like one personality type, and also not just one type of skill set. You don't want to have any big egos. You don't want to have too many discussions all the time. And it's important to get to know each other and get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. For example, me, I make like little mistakes with maybe like I switch numbers here and there. And that is lethal if you're doing a meta-analysis. If I make a little switch a 3 for a 4, that could ruin the whole thing. So I tell everybody I start working with, I do these mistakes, and I pick especially one of them, usually somebody who is super OCD about things, to check my numbers. So by doing that, you can ensure that your team as a whole works really well. And finally, be professional with each other, because you're going to spend a lot of time with each other, probably 3 to 6 months, as I said. So you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and feels respected. And you want to create a psychologically safe environment for everybody to raise concerns in, because everybody's going to make mistakes. And what you want is people to openly criticize your work. And you want people where you can do the same to them. So you can try to achieve perfection. Fine. And so Ideally, in this team of 4, you want to have one person who's really good at scientific writing and is good at creative and abstract thinking. Then you want one person who is good at coding and can do the meta-analysis, and you want one person who is sort of very attentive and can write the references and check everyone's work as you go. But obviously, if everybody can do everything, that's the best case scenario. And then there is a flow chart online. There are many like this that map out nicely, actually, what the entire process is. And if you just familiarize yourself with a flowchart like this, then it breaks down this whole mountain that a systematic review seems like into manageable chunks. So here you see, for example, number 1, research question, then you do a preliminary research just to check if it's a viable research question. Then you search the databases, and you see there are Embase, PubMed, Scopus, Google Scholar. All the others aren't really that important. But basically, you search all those, then you import them, for example, into Excel, and then you do the title and abstract screening, number 7. Once you've done that, you come to a final list of papers that match your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and usually inclusion and exclusion criteria. Reading papers in that field, you will gain an understanding for what the other researchers are doing. For example, for us, normal pressure hydrocephalus, inclusion criteria was that all patients are shunted. Inclusion criteria was that every patient gets a CT before the shunting, so that there is a radiological confirmation of the diagnosis. And obviously, we're not neurosurgeons, so we wouldn't have known that this is a must to be certain that this is a normal pressure hydrocephalus. But by reading other people's papers, often by esteemed neurosurgeons, we understood what is really important in clinical practice. And so if you want to find out what ideal inclusion and exclusion criteria are, just read around. Once you've done that, you extract the data, as I said, into tables, do your statistical analysis, and then you write your manuscript. And a good platform to do your data extraction in is Covenants. And usually medical schools give their students like free access to it, but you don't necessarily need it. And then for the quality assessment, again, if you just Google quality assessment, meta-analysis, systematic reviews, a lot of them will come up, but the main ones are the ROB2 tool, the Robbins tool as well. So those two are freely available online. And finally, for R, you can use Stata or R. And yeah, manuscript writing. So what I usually do is we have a SharePoint, Google Drive, and everybody has access to it. And you make everything very accessible for everybody. Put it all nicely organized into files, because you don't want to be at 4 months, 5 months, and then lose track of what you've done so far and where your material is stored. All right, so 1 second. So regarding the databases, the best platform to start with is Ovid. Here you can select to screen Medline and Embase. And Ovid, all these databases you have access to through your medical school login. And all you need to do, once you go on this website, you select Medline and Embase, and then it will take you to like an input section where you can, for example, for us, it was normal pressure hydrocephalus. So if we put in normal pressure hydrocephalus, then it will give us all the papers for normal pressure hydrocephalus that have been ever published. Now, the search engine has more complex functions because what we did back then, we screened only using the search term normal pressure hydrocephalus. And you can imagine that's a very broad search term. And we ended up spending a lot of time searching all the database. There's pros to that because you don't accidentally exclude papers, and you have more of a scope. So we only did normal pressure hydrocephalus, but then we had so many papers like on radiology, biochemistry, biochemical markers, and clinical markers. So we got 3 papers published out of it. But if you want to save your time, have a look at a YouTube video explaining how to use the Ovid search engine, or librarians can be really helpful for this as well. And the thing is with Ovid, oftentimes there's a specific syntax. For example, if you want to check every title where normal pressure hydrocephalus in children is used, then you have to use child with a star, because the titles could say normal pressure hydrocephalus in a child or in children, or etc. So it's really important to familiarize yourself with the syntax. That's basically what I'm trying to say. And then you have to think about, okay, for example, you are trying to do some research on AIDS, and if you just put in the word AIDS into the search engine, it will give you a very narrow output, because researchers might use acronyms or synonyms of the same word. So what you want to do is cover all these different synonyms and spelling variants as well. So how do you do that? You use Boolean operators. So again, still in the same search engine, there are different operators such as and, or, and not. So if you put in, for example, dogs and cats, the search engine will show you all the titles which contain both of these terms. However, the downfall is that it will exclude all the papers that either just mention dogs or just mention cats. And if you're looking at both, then that's not what you want to do. Simultaneously, if you use dogs or cats, then it will give you both, but you're going to have a big database to search with. So it's really finding like a balance between these two. If you have the time, I always recommend people to keep the data search very, very broad, and then manually exclude papers, because that way you don't run into the risk of accidentally excluding papers. For example, from our experience, when we use these Boolean operators, there were some titles which didn't even mention normal pressure hydrocephalus, or and somehow the search engine didn't really check the text. So that paper was just excluded, because we use normal pressure hydrocephalus and predict. So I'd say keep it broad, take the time, and do it thoroughly. Finally, covenants. The input looks approximately like this, and it's has a good user design, and it goes step by step. First, you do a title and just the abstract screen, and 2 reviewers do it. So 2 of your team do it independently, blinded from each other, and then there will be disagreements where one of them says, no, I want this to be included. The other person says, no, I don't want this to be included. And then a third person can then give their input and come to a final list of papers. And once that's done, you have your maybe 24 papers, and then you can extract those into Excel tables. And yeah. So regarding the data extraction, when I say you want to extract them into the Excel tables, you have to understand what you want the readers to know about each study. And usually it's the study details. So for example, name of the study, date, study design, methodology, and like the main reported outcomes. And if, for example, usually there is some specific information that are needed for each field. For example, for us, normal pressure hydrocephalus, it was really important to know how many patients were actually shunted, or for example, how many patients had neurological comorbidities. So you will have to think about what these sort of columns in your table will be. And then once you have these columns set, you split the papers, say we have 24 papers, you split it into 6, yeah? So every team member gets 6 papers and puts, fills these tables using these studies. And then once you've done the tables, you want to do a risk assessment. And for risk assessment, there are validated scoring tools, such as the Robbins-1 or ROB2 tool, and they're freely available online. And you basically judge the risk of bias on different domains, such as patient recruitment or statistical analysis. And that is a bit tricky to do, you know, thinking you're just a medical student, how am I going to critique somebody who's done, I don't know, PhD, is a professor or whatever. But trust me, nobody makes perfect research. So you have to be very harsh but fair. But these guys will help you make a informed decision on where you score each study, whether it's high risk or low risk of bias. The guides which are available online will tell you exactly how to balance it. And then finally, you come up with the plot like those on the left. And that will be very nice for the readers to gauge how good the papers are that you have included, because that will then translate into how strong your own conclusions are.
Santhosh, sorry to interrupt. I think we've just got a number of people in the waiting room. Would you mind just adding, letting them in if that's possible?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much.
Fine. So finally, what you also want to do is you want to make a Prisma chart. And Prisma chart you can download from the internet, and you just fill it in with your own sort of parameters. So that's why it's important to keep track of everything you're doing. Always keep minutes, and keep minutes of all the numbers that you're going through, and then fill them out as you go. So once you've done that, you go on to do your tables, and you can do them easily in Excel. And regarding how the table looks, don't worry too much about it, because usually the journals, they will sort of format themselves into making them look good. And yeah, so basically you have a talk with your group, agree on columns and rows, and then you split the papers. So everybody, for example, does one table. For my group, for example, back then, there were different clinical predictors, such as intracranial pressure monitoring, extended lumbar drainage, and tap tests. So we thought, okay, fine, we have different tests. And approximately the same number of papers talk about each test. So each one of us focused on one table, and each one of us then translated what was in that table into the results section. And regarding the meta-analysis, ideally, if you can do it, you have 3 people working on the results. So the written part, you know, the systematic review part, which is basically a summary of what you've read. And that one person then completely dedicates themselves to the meta-analysis. And ideally, you want that to be done by somebody who's good with numbers and can code. If they cannot code, you can learn it on YouTube or DataCamp. But if you want it to be done quickly, you can learn it on YouTube, how to do it with Stata or SPSS. It's easier than R, but also less powerful. Fine. So regarding how to do a meta-analysis, yeah, Google it, YouTube it. best platform really is DataCamp, and the best website is Bookdown. And DataCamp is not free, but Bookdown is free, and is probably the best tool I used to get the meta-analysis done back then. And yeah, this is what it looks like. It's very comprehensive. Now, if you can't do a meta-analysis, what you can do is, oops. So, oh no. So if you want to do a meta-analysis, before that actually, you have to collate the data into Excel, because the programs used to calculate the meta-analysis, they need to have like a database. So you collate all the data in Excel, and then you write your code on what you want to analyze. And usually there is like packages out there that will almost like blueprint you the code. So you basically only have to copy and paste and then fine tune it to your own project. And then you generate the plots, and then you copy those plots into your manuscript. And I know this is very simplified and easier said than done, but I want to give you like an overview of the different steps. And once you have read through Bookdown, I think it will make a lot more sense. So, for example, we did a diagnostic efficiency meta-analysis, and this is sort of what the data input looks like. It's important to note that, for example, R has a very peculiar way of interpreting data, and it needs data to be a very specific way. And each of the different languages, coding languages, has a different requirement for input. So familiarize yourself with how the language actually works. So you can create good spreadsheets where the program can then leverage it to make good graphs. So this is perhaps the most important step of the whole meta-analysis, making appropriate and good spreadsheets. And as I said, so for the previous one was a diagnostic efficiency one. This is a treatment efficiency one. And the previous one is based on diagnostic odds ratios, whereas this one is maybe based on standard mean difference. And using different sort of output measures will completely change as well what input you need. So again, not only between languages, but even in a language itself, it's really important what sort of you're trying to measure. So familiarize yourself before actually writing the code. How do I collate my data? And for that, personally, I use YouTube. A lot of people do code alongs. For example, they code meta-analysis, and you can literally watch them what they're doing. And especially for the first step on how to collate the data, I found that quite useful. Then, yeah, you write your own code, and usually packages are out there free, and you just read them and can take and copy and paste it. And then, watching tutorials, you can fine tune it to what you need it to be. And this is sort of what the interface looks like. And the thing is with coding, it's very much a lot of trial and error. So give it a go. You will fail most likely first attempt, probably first 10 attempts, but keep going. At one point it will make click, and then you've learned it, you've successfully done it. And the nice thing about it is that it always tells you where the mistake in the code is. And then if you copy and paste that error message into Google, a lot of people will give answers or ask the same question, which will then be answered on, for example, GitHub. And so there's a big community of coders out there, and everybody helps each other. And once you've learned how to do it, you can just do it over and over again. So the learning curve is quite steep, but once you get there, it's an extremely powerful tool. Now, if you cannot do a meta-analysis, not the end of the world. There are a lot of systematic reviews out there without a meta-analysis, and they're still great. And there are new ways recommended by Cochrane how to do it. And it's called a swim analysis. It basically stands for systematic review without meta-analysis. And it's basically a qualitative way of presenting your data. And this can be, for example, through descriptive plots, such as harvest plots, or just, for example, pie charts, bar charts, and all these ways of sort of presenting your data are still a lot better than just having tables. And even if you do a meta-analysis, actually, having these sort of qualitative ways of presenting your data is a lot better for the reader, because what you want is specialists to read the paper and then for them to retain what you're trying to say. And for that purpose, sort of graphs, forest plots from a meta-analysis are good, of course, but also bar charts, pie charts, harvest plot, they stick to their minds, and usually people don't really have time to read through your whole manuscript. So having catchy sort of graphs will really elevate the paper and make it more likely for journalists to publish it. So this, for example, one we did back then, because we simply didn't have enough time. No, not enough time, but we didn't have good data to run a meta-analysis. So we thought, okay, fine, we do a harvest plot, and it was still accepted, and it's better than just tables for sure. So finally, you want to finish, once you have done your manuscript, right? You have gotten second opinions, you want to create a cover letter. And a cover letter usually looks something like that. Maybe from your bachelor thesis or master's thesis, if you've done one, you know how it's structured. You want to have your title, the authors, institutions, with the corresponding author. And that's sort of the first page, right? And then, of course, always look at how your journal of choice wants it, but usually this is the way. Then you want a cover letter to the editor, and basically you address it to the editor and you explain to them in like on one page why you think your piece of research is the right choice for them to publish in their next volume. So here you're really trying to be like a salesman, and you're trying to pinpoint exactly where the gap in the literature is. You're trying to show them why your paper fills that gap, and then also show them that they have, for example, published something similar in this topic. So it sort of aligns with their journal's sort of research direction as well. Right. And then after the cover letter, you insert your manuscript from abstract to introduction to conclusion, then put in your tables, then your figures, and at the end, you have your references, and if you want, acknowledgements. So I've talked for 45 minutes now, so it was quite a bit of a monologue, and I do realize, I think the best way of learning, probably trying to transfer information as well, is by having a dialogue. So if anybody has questions, maybe if you could pop them into the chat, it's probably better than people are muting themselves, right?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. If there's any questions, yeah, please do pop them into chat. I think what we'll do, Santhosh, if that's all right with you, is I might hand over to some of the RSM executive committee, and then at the end, maybe we can go through some questions.
Yeah, sure.
Is that fine? Okay. So I think we've just got a word from some of our RSM executive committee who are on the call. So if I just hand over to Bumi.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. Santhosh, that was amazing. Thank you for being so honest and insightful about the exact process. You know, you've spent a lot of time figuring that out and going through the hard work. So yeah, thank you for being so willing to share that with everyone. And it was just as inspiring as when I first spoke to you. I just wanted to say to everyone here, so this is run by the RSM student section. This is something we all do voluntarily because we're already passionate about improving access to research and general medical initiatives. So please sign up on our website for updates and membership if this is the kind of stuff you're interested in. There's loads of other events that we run, and to gain access to those, you will need membership. For instance, we're running a surgical conference, there'll be a Women in Surgery Day, loads of these events in person with networking at the Royal Society of Medicine building. So yeah, please sign up, and I hope you guys enjoy the talk and have a good time with the rest of the series.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Ruth.
much. So I think what we'll do, Santhosh, is if we just go to the feedback slide,
Yeah.
if everyone could just fill out the feedback form. We'll also be monitoring attendance this way, as I've explained earlier. Thanks a lot for coming, everyone. And yeah, if there's any questions, I think there's already been a few posted through the chat. I'll just let Santhosh, you can run through them. And we'll be talking for a bit longer, I think, just letting you run through any questions.
Of course.
But yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
All right. Okay. So there is plenty of questions here. So first one is, I think this one is really important. How would you suggest authorship be allocated for a systematic review? So this is a tricky one. And this is why I said you don't want to have big egos on the team who, you know, if everybody constantly wants to be first named author, that's problematic. But usually a good common ground is to choose a person who came up with the idea of doing the systematic review, who came up with the research question to be the first named author, but still the other people on the team can still be shared first authors. So that's how we did it, because we knew everybody was going to put in a lot of work. So we said, all right, we're all going to be shared first authors. And that way that was sort of out of the way and everybody just focused on the task at hand. Then you mentioned about finding senior authors who will be happy to supervise and another group of those who will elevate your review. Have you got any advice on how to find and screen for these sorts of people? Honestly, it's about luck as well, and or chance rather, and to increase the chance of finding somebody who is, you know, useful, you have to increase the time, the number of times you try. So if you have your manuscript ready, honestly, send it to 10, 20, 30 people and just see what happens. And yeah, always make sure though to say, oh yeah, we would like your input and would like you to have you a senior author, right? So if they try to, you know, take first authorship, just make that clear. If they don't want to do that, fine, then you're going to find somebody else. Okay. Do you have any tips for preclinical students who haven't had much ward experience yet? Same thing. I don't think you need to study medicine or be a professor or at any stage to write papers for medical research. It helps. But if you read a lot of papers and read a lot around the topic, I think you can still create something meaningful. And can you use other coding languages such as Python? I'm sure you can, but I think for statistical coding, R is the gold standard. What material would you recommend on how to do a thematic synthesis? I would recommend the Cochrane library. They have a good guide on how to do a swim analysis. And yeah, I did neurosurgery because I want to be a neurosurgeon, and you can do whatever field you want to do. All right. So how did you balance your time between collecting data and your medical school commitments? Not very successfully in the beginning, but as you go along, you understand how to split your time. And usually what I did was set myself a time, all right, till maybe 8 p.m. I'll just do medicine, and then I do like 2 hours of research. And obviously it cuts into other things, such as your sleep. But you know, if you're passionate about it, you do it. The first time around, it takes quite a lot of time, but after you've done it once, you know, it's way quicker and way much easier to sort of do along with your medical studies and other commitments. Fine. All right. Could you describe the figure you use for risk and bias assessment again, please? Sure, will do. All right. Let me just do that. And that's the last thing. All right, here we go. So basically, this is a traffic plot. That's what you call it. And at the top, you can see different domains, such as the randomization process. And in each plot basically has a guide and will tell you exactly what each column name means. For example, randomization process means whether it was blinded, whether it was double blinded. And based on that, you then score each study: low risk, moderate risk, high risk. And you put that in an Excel spreadsheet, and then R can give you a plot with different colors. And for a reader, right, if I read a paper, I want to have things quickly. So if I see a plot with a lot of red, I know, okay, this is not a great evidence base, which means two things. My findings in my paper has limitations, but also there's a significant problem with the research and the scientists in this field, and they need to fix it. So having a lot of red there is not a bad thing. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. Fine. Finally, what was the time commitment every week? If you don't have as much time, could you just extend beyond the typical 3 to 6 months? Completely, yeah, completely. Probably around, you can extend it to 12 months, even longer, to be honest, but it depends on the research question. Because one, you're probably, chasing against somebody else in the world who's doing the same thing. So it's a bit of like a competition. And secondly, you don't want your search to age, right? Because if you start now 2019 and you go on to 2021, in the 2-year gap, there's going to be new relevant papers. So your paper won't be up to date anymore. But time commitment, very difficult to say. For me back then, it was like probably an hour and a half each day. But that was you can do it definitely in less time. All right, how did you make sure that you have a team of people reliable enough for this? Very difficult to say. I chose my friends because I trust them and I know they're smart people. But I've had bad experiences as well. But in that case, you just take them out. That sounds wrong. You quit working with them for the time being, still keep them as author, but then replace them with somebody else who does better work. And you just go with the flow. Have you now written for similar reviews using the, yeah, I've done many of them now. I've done them with meta-analyses on different topics and fields in neurosurgery. And the goal is always still to, make it better. And that's why keep reading in the top journals. There's always other people who do it much better than you. So even once you've done your meta-analysis, always try to improve. All right, now finally, I want to end this talk on a quote. Right. So this is something my friend Mahmoud, one of my team members as well, said all the time while we were doing this, because he would be the type of guy to always question, or are we doing things right? Could we do things better? And at times that sort of personality in your group is going to be annoying, but you need that sort of person to make things constantly better. So he said the cost of perfection is terminal vigilance. You always have to be on your tiptoes, think, where am I making a mistake? How can I make it better? And how can I create something that almost reaches perfection for the scientific community and in the end for your patients as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And I wish you best of luck in your future studies.
Thanks a lot, Santhosh. Thank you. Really insightful talk. I think we've just had a few questions about slides and recording. We're looking into ways of making that accessible. We're just going to have to clarify that through some relevant RSM channels and things like that. But hopefully we'll be able to get that out to everyone. And yeah, again, thank you so much, Santhosh. Really insightful talk. I think a lot